We note an amusing little touch in the indefinite allusion to a man who, with his unnamed family, had considered that he had seen a stone fall. The man was the Reverend W. Carus Wilson, who was well known in his day. The next instance was reported by W.P. Tripp, FMRS, that during a thunderstorm, a farmer had seen the ground in front of him plowed up by something that was luminous. Doug, bronze axe. My own notion is that an expedition to the North Pole could not be so urgent as that representative scientists should have gone to that farmer, and there spent a summer studying this one reported occurrence. As it is, an unnamed farmer, somewhere, no date. The thing must stay damned. Another specimen for our museum is a comment in Nature upon these objects, that they are of an amusing character, thus clearly showing that they were of terrestrial and not a celestial character. Just why celestiality, or that of it which, too, is only of intermediateness, should not be quite as amusing as terrestriality, is beyond our reasoning powers, which we have agreed are not ordinary. Of course, there is nothing amusing about wedges and spheres at all, or Archimedes and Euclid are humorists. It is that they were described derisively. And if you'd like a little specimen of the standardization of orthodox opinion, American Meteorological Journal 4-589. They are of an amusing character, thus clearly showing that they were of a terrestrial and not a celestial character. I'm sure, not positively of course, that we've tried to be as easygoing and lenient with Mr. Simons as his obviously scientific performance would permit. Of course, it may be that subconsciously we were prejudiced against him, instinctively classing him with St. Augustine, Darwin, St. Jerome, and Lyell. As to the thunderstones, I think that he investigated them mostly for the credit of Englishmen, or in the spirit of the Royal Krakatoa Committee, or about as the commission from the French Academy investigated meteorites. According to a writer in Knowledge 5-418, the Krakatoa Committee attempted not in the least to prove what had caused the atmospheric effects of 1883, but to prove that Krakatoa did it. Altogether, I should think that the following quotation should be enlightening to anyone who still thinks that these occurrences were investigated not to support an opinion formed in advance. In opening his paper, Mr. Simons says that he undertook his investigation as to the existence of thunderstones, or thunderbolts as he calls them, feeling certain that there was a weak point somewhere, inasmuch as thunderbolts have no existence. We have another instance of the reported fall of a cannonball. It occurred prior to Mr. Simons' investigations, but is not mentioned by him. It was investigated, however. In the Proceedings of the Royal Society of Edinburgh 3-147 is the report of a thunderstone, supposed to have fallen in Hampshire, September 1852. It was an iron cannonball, or it was a large nodule of iron pyrites or bisulfurate of iron. No one had seen it fall. It had been noticed upon a garden path for the first time after a thunderstorm. It was only a supposed thing because it had not the character of any known meteorite. In the London Times, September 16, 1852, appears a letter from Mr. George E. Bailey, a chemist of Andover, Hants. He says that, in a very heavy thunderstorm of the first week of September 1852, this iron object had fallen in the garden of Mr. Robert Dowling of Andover, that it had fallen upon a path within 6 yards of the house. It had been picked up immediately after the storm by Mrs. Dowling. It was about the size of a cricket ball, weighing 4 pounds. No one had seen it fall. In the Times, September 15, 1852, there is an account of this thunderstorm, which was of unusual violence. There are some other data relative to the ball of quartz of Westmoreland. They're poor things. There's so little to them that they look like ghosts of the damned. However, ghosts, when multiplied, take on what is called substantiality. If the solidest thing conceivable in quasi-existence is only concentrated phantomosity, it is not only that there have been other reports of quartz that have fallen from the sky, there is another agreement. The round quartz object of Westmoreland if broken open and separated from its loose nucleus, would be a round, hollow quartz object. My pseudo-position is that two reports of similar extraordinary occurrences, one from England and one from Canada, are interesting. Proceedings of the Canadian Institute 3-7-8. That, at the meeting of the Institute of December 1st, 1888, one of the members, Mr. J. A. Livingston, exhibited a globular quartz body, which he asserted had fallen from the sky. It had been split open. It was hollow. But the other members of the Institute decided that the object was spurious, because it was not of true meteoric material. No date, no place mentioned. We note the suggestion that it was only a geode, which had been upon the ground in the first place. Its crystalline lining was geode-like. Quartz is upon the Index Prohibitory of Science. A monk who would read Darwin would sin no more than would a scientist who would admit that, except by the up and down process, quartz has ever fallen from the sky. But continuity, it is not excommunicated if part of or incorporated in a baptized meteorite. St. Catherine's of Mexico, I think. It's as Epicurean a distinction as any ever made by theologians. Fasig lists a quartz pebble found in a hailstone, Bibliography, Part 2-355. Up and down, of course. Another object of quartzite was reported to have fallen in the autumn of 1880 at Schroon Lake, New York. Said in the Scientific American 43-272 to be a fraud. It was not the usual. About the 1st of May, 1899, the newspapers published a story of a snow-white meteorite that had fallen at Vincennes, Indiana. The editor of the Monthly Weather Review, issue of April 1899, requested the local observer at Vincennes to investigate. The editor says that the thing was only a fragment of a quartz boulder. He said that anyone with at least a public school education should know better than to write that quartz has ever fallen from the sky. Notes and Queries 2-8-92. That, in the Leyden Museum of Antiquities, there is a disc of quartz, 6 centimeters by 5 millimeters by about 5 centimeters, said to have fallen upon a plantation in the Dutch West Indies after a meteoric explosion. Bricks. I think this is a vice we're writing. I recommend it to those who have hankered for a new sin. At first some of our data were so frightful or ridiculous, mean as to be hated or eyebrowed, was only to be seen. Then some pity crept in. I think that we can now embrace bricks. The baked clay idea was all right in its place, but it rather lacks distinction, I think. With our minds upon the concrete boats that have been building terrestrial lately, and thinking of wrecks that may occur to some of them, and of a new material for the deep-sea fishes to disregard. Object that fell at Richland, South Carolina, yellow to gray, said to look like a piece of brick. American Journal of Science 2-34-298. Pieces of a furnace-made brick said to have fallen in a hailstorm at Padua, August 1834. Edinburgh New Philosophical Journal 19-87. The writer offered an explanation that started another convention, that the fragments of brick had been knocked from buildings by the hailstones. But there is here a non-combatant that will be disagreeable to anyone who may have been inclined to smile at the now digestible enough notion that furnace-made bricks had fallen from the sky. It is that in some of the hailstones, 2% of them that were found with the pieces of brick was a light grayish powder. Monthly Notices of the Royal Astronomical Society, 337-365. Padre Secchi explains that a stone said to have fallen in a thunderstorm at Supino, Italy, September 1875, had been knocked from a roof. Nature 33-153. That it had been reported that a good-sized stone, of form clearly artificial, had fallen at Naples, November 1885. The stone was described by 2 professors of Naples, who had accepted it as inexplicable but veritable. They were visited by Dr. H. Johnstone Lavis, the correspondent to Nature, whose investigations had convinced him that the object was a shoemaker's lapstone.